Kang Dae-ho stared at his computer screen with tired eyes. The numbers on the display were blurring together after another long night of coding. His small apartment in Seoul was a mess. Empty pizza boxes covered the desk, old coffee cups sat everywhere. The air smelled like instant noodles and stress. He was only 28 years old but felt much older. His back hurt from sitting in the same chair for hours. His eyes burned from looking at screens all day. As a freelance programmer, he worked alone. Most of the time, the money was okay, but the loneliness was getting harder to handle 3 months ago. Everything had changed when alien ships appeared over major cities around the world. The aliens called themselves traders from something called the Galactic Commerce Network. They wanted to do business with Earth. At first, everyone was scared, but the aliens seemed friendly enough. They just wanted to sell things. Dae-ho had spent weeks looking through their online catalog. It was amazing what other planets had invented. There were machines that could clean your entire house in minutes, food that never went bad, computers that worked 1,000 times faster than anything on Earth, but most things cost more money than he would ever have then. He saw a domestic service android designed to help with daily tasks. The description said it could cook, clean, organize files, and even help with simple programming work. The price was huge. It would take all his savings plus money he would have to borrow, but Dae-ho was desperate for help. He lived alone and barely had time to take care of himself. His apartment was always dirty. He ate junk food because he had no time to cook. His laundry piled up for weeks. The android seemed like the perfect solution. It would handle all the boring stuff while he focused on his work. The ordering process was complicated. He had to fill out forms in 3 different alien languages. Even with translation software, it took him 2 days to complete everything. The aliens wanted to know everything about his living situation, his work schedule, even what kind of food he liked. When he finally submitted the order, the confirmation message said delivery would take 3 to 4 weeks. Earth was apparently very far from the main shipping routes. The android would come in a special container designed to keep it safe during the long journey through space. Dae spent those weeks cleaning his apartment and getting ready. He moved furniture around to make space for the android. He bought extra food and made sure his internet connection was strong enough. He even practiced what he would say when it arrived. He had never owned anything so advanced before. The waiting was torture. Every day he checked his email for shipping updates. The aliens sent messages in their own language that the translation software could barely handle. Sometimes it said the package was on schedule. Other times it seemed to say there were delays. He could never be sure what was really happening. Finally, after 3 weeks and 2 days, he got a message that made his heart race. The package would arrive that afternoon. A special delivery ship would land on his apartment building roof. He needed to be ready to sign for it and help move it. Instead, Dae spent the morning pacing around his apartment. He kept checking the time and looking out his window. He had cleaned everything twice. He had read the Android instruction manual so many times he knew it by heart. He was more excited than he had been about anything in years. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, he heard a strange humming sound outside. His windows began to glow with blue light. He ran to look outside and saw something incredible. A small alien ship was hovering just above his building. It looked like a silver disc with lights around the edges. 2 aliens in white suits floated down from the ship. They were carrying a large metal box between them. The box was about the size of a refrigerator and covered with blinking lights. The aliens looked almost human, except their skin was slightly blue and they had large, dark eyes. Dae ran downstairs to meet them in the hallway. The aliens spoke through small devices that translated their words into Korean. Their voices sounded musical and strange. One of them asked him to confirm his identity and sign a digital pad. The other one scanned the hallway with some kind of device. They carried the box into his apartment and set it down in his living room. The box was making soft beeping sounds and the lights were flashing in patterns. One alien touched a panel on the side and stepped back. He told Dae-ho that the container would open itself in 5 minutes. Then both aliens left without saying anything else. Dae-ho sat on his couch and stared at the box. His heart was beating fast. This was really happening. He was about to meet his new android helper. Everything was going to change. His lonely, boring life would finally get better. He would have someone to talk to, even if it was just a machine. The 5 minutes felt like hours. Finally, the box made a louder beeping sound. The lights started flashing faster. Then the sides of the box began to fold down like flower petals, opening a strange mist came out of the box. It smelled like ozone and something sweet he could not identify as. The mist cleared. Deho saw something that made him freeze. The person standing in his living room was definitely not an android. It was a small human girl. She looked maybe 7 or 8 years old. She had long black hair that reached her shoulders. Her skin was pale and perfect like porcelain. She was wearing a simple white dress that seemed to glow slightly. Her feet were bare. The most striking thing about her were her eyes. They were dark brown but seemed to contain tiny lights like stars. Her whole presence felt somehow otherworldly, but she was clearly human. The girl looked around the apartment with curiosity. She seemed to notice everything: the messy desk, the computer screens, the empty food containers. She turned her head to study each thing carefully, like she was memorizing it all. Then her eyes met his. She smiled and spoke in perfect Korean. Her voice was soft and musical, like the aliens, but definitely human. She said hello and told him her name was Nari. She asked if he was Kang Daeho and if this was going to be her new home. Daeho could not speak. He just stared at her. This had to be some kind of mistake. He had ordered a robot, a machine, to help with housework. Instead, he had received a human child. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she in the android shipping container? Nari seemed to understand his confusion. She told him she knew he had been expecting something different. She said there had been complications with his order, but she was here now, and she wanted to help him. She asked if that would be okay. Dea finally found his voice. He asked her who she really was and why she had been shipped to him like a package. Nari looked sad for a moment. She said she was not entirely sure herself. She remembered traveling a very long way. She remembered being told that someone named Daeho needed help and would take care of her. She walked over to his computer and looked at the screen. She asked if he was working on the inventory system for the electronics store downtown. Daeho was shocked. He had not mentioned that project to anyone. How could she possibly know about it? Nari smiled again and said she could help him finish it if he wanted. She sat down at his computer and began typing. The code that appeared on the screen was perfect. It was exactly what he had been struggling with for days, but written in a way that was elegant and efficient. As Daeho watched this strange little girl solve his programming problems with ease, he realized his life had just become much more complicated than he had ever imagined. Whatever Nari really was, she was definitely not the simple android he had ordered. She was something much more mysterious and potentially much more important. 3 months had passed since Nari arrived in the strange shipping container. Daeho had gotten used to living with her, but he still had no idea what she really was. She looked like an ordinary 8-year-old girl, but everything about her was extraordinary. Every morning Nari would wake up early and make breakfast. She never burned anything and somehow always knew exactly what he was in the mood to eat. When he asked how she knew, she would just smile and say she could tell by looking at him. Her cooking was better than any restaurant during the day. While Daeho worked, Nari would help organize his apartment. She never seemed to get tired or bored. She could fold laundry perfectly and knew exactly where everything belonged. Even more amazing, she somehow made his old appliances work better just by being near them. His computer had started running faster since she arrived. His internet connection was more stable. His phone battery lasted longer. His neighbors began asking what he had done because their electronics were working better too. It was like Nari gave off some kind of energy that improved technology. The strangest thing was how smart she was. Daeho had started giving her harder and harder programming problems to solve. She could write code in languages she had never seen before. She understood complex mathematics that took him hours to figure out. She could look at broken software and fix it instantly, but she was also clearly just a child. She cried when she watched sad movies. She laughed at silly cartoons. She got excited about simple things like ice cream and pretty flowers. She would curl up next to him on the couch and fall asleep during boring TV shows. Dea tried many times to contact the alien company that had shipped her to him. Every communication channel he had used for the original order was now dead. The aliens had apparently disappeared completely. He had no way to report the mistake or ask for explanations. As time went on, Nari began having nightmares. She would wake up screaming about darkness and cold emptiness. She talked about voices calling her name from very far away. In her sleep, she sometimes spoke in languages that did not sound like anything from Earth. One night, her nightmare was so bad As she woke up glowing, her skin gave off a soft blue light like starlight. The glow faded quickly, but Deho had definitely seen it. When he asked her about it the next morning, she said she did not remember, but she looked scared. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon. Nari was helping him prepare dinner. She was cutting vegetables with a small knife. Deho was explaining a problem he was having with a client when Nari suddenly gasped and dropped the knife. The blade had slipped and cut her finger deeply. Deho rushed to get bandages, but stopped when he saw what was flowing from the wound. Instead of red blood, a silvery liquid dripped onto the cutting board. It moved and swirled like it was alive. Nari stared at her finger with growing recognition and fear. She whispered that she remembered something important, but it felt like trying to catch smoke. The silver liquid continued to flow for a few seconds, then stopped. The cut healed completely, leaving no scar. Deho got his microscope from the closet where he kept old electronics projects. He put a drop of the silver liquid under the lens. What he saw made him gasp. The substance looked like liquid starlight. It moved with purpose and seemed to contain tiny points of light that pulsed like heartbeats. That night, Nari's nightmare was different. Instead of screaming, she began speaking clearly in her sleep. She talked about floating through vast libraries of information. She described databases that contained the knowledge of thousands of civilizations. She spoke of learning everything about species across the galaxy. She remembered being something else before she became human. She had existed as pure information, traveling between worlds and collecting knowledge. But then something had gone wrong. She had been discovered by those who wanted to use her. She had been hunted and had barely escaped in her dreams. She remembered making a desperate choice. She had hidden herself in the only place her pursuers would never look. She had become human and arranged to be sent to a planet so primitive that no one would think to search there. She had chosen Earth, and she had chosen Deho. When she woke up, she found Deho sitting beside her bed. He had heard everything she said in her sleep. He asked her gently if she remembered any of it. Nari nodded slowly and said the memories were coming back like pieces of a broken picture. She told him she was something called the archive entity. She had been created long ago by a civilization that wanted to preserve all knowledge in the universe for thousands of years. She had traveled through space, learning everything she could from every species she encountered, but knowledge was power, and power made people fight. Different alien governments had tried to capture her and use her for their own purposes. They wanted to control what information their people could access. They wanted to use her knowledge to build weapons and conquer other worlds. The fighting had made her sad and lonely. She had never wanted to be a weapon. She just wanted to learn and help people understand things better. When the wars over her became too terrible, she had decided to disappear. She had chosen to become human because humans seemed different. She had watched Earth for a long time before making her choice. She had seen how humans shared information freely on their internet. She had observed how they used knowledge to help each other rather than to gain power over others. She had seen Deho working late into the night, not to get rich, but to create programs that helped small businesses succeed. That was why she had arranged to be sent to him. She knew he would care for her as a person rather than try to use her as a tool. She had been right. The past 3 months had been the happiest time she could remember. She finally had a family and a home. Deho felt overwhelmed by this revelation. The little girl he had been caring for was actually the most important being in the galaxy. She contained all the knowledge of countless civilizations, and yet she had chosen to trust him with her secret. She had become his daughter by choice. He promised her that he would never let anyone take her away or force her to be something she did not want to be. He would protect her no matter what happened. Nari smiled and hugged him tightly. She said she had chosen well and that she loved being his daughter, but even as they held each other, both of them knew that their peaceful life could not last forever. Somewhere in space, those who had been hunting the archive entity were still looking. Eventually, they would realize that Earth had become much more advanced much too quickly. They would come looking for answers. As if summoned by their fears, a bright light appeared outside the apartment window. A ship was descending from the night sky. It was not the friendly blue glow of the delivery aliens. This light was harsh and white like a searchlight. The hunters had found them. Nari gripped Deho's hand tightly. She whispered that they had to run. The ship outside was scanning the building, looking for the energy signature she gave off. She tried to hide her power, but it was too late. The long chase that had brought her to Earth was about to begin again. 6 months had passed since Nari first appeared in Deho apartment. Earth had changed in ways that most people did not even notice. New farming techniques had appeared in research papers. Overnight medical breakthroughs happened every week. Energy problems that had puzzled scientists for decades were suddenly being solved by unknown researchers. The changes were subtle, but they were everywhere. Computer programs ran more efficiently, crops grew faster in certain regions, clean water systems appeared in places that had never had them before. It was as if someone was quietly sharing advanced knowledge with humanity. Deho knew the truth behind all these improvements. Every time Nari felt sad about human suffering, she unconsciously reached out with her mind. Information would flow from her vast memory into Earth computers, appearing as anonymous research papers or mysterious data uploads. She could not help herself when she saw news about hungry children or sick people or environmental damage. Her emotions would trigger her abilities. Knowledge that could solve these problems would automatically share itself with humans who could use it. She was healing the world without even trying, but this rapid progress had caught the attention of the galactic community. Advanced alien civilizations were starting to ask questions about Earth. How had this primitive planet suddenly begun solving problems that stumped much older species? Where were these breakthrough discoveries really coming from? The first sign of trouble came when new alien visitors arrived at Earth. They called themselves trade ambassadors from the Corvani Collective. They claimed to represent several species interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations with humanity, but their questions were strange. They wanted to know about recent technological developments. They asked if Earth had encountered any unusual phenomena. They seemed particularly interested in whether any advanced entities had made contact with human governments. Lee En-ho was the Korean government official assigned to handle these alien visitors. He was a careful man who noticed details that others missed. He had been tracking the mysterious improvements in Korean technology. Many of the advances seemed to originate from research connected to Seoul. His investigation led him to discover that several breakthroughs had come from institutions that had somehow gained access to Daeho programming work. When he dug deeper, he found that Daeho lived with an unregistered child who had no birth records or official documents anywhere. Meanwhile, the Corvani ambassadors were becoming more insistent. They demanded to meet with Earth leaders. They wanted access to human research facilities. They claimed they needed to establish biological and technological baselines for future cooperation. Nari sensed the danger immediately. When she saw the Corvani on television, she became frightened and tried to hide her abilities. She pretended to be an ordinary child, but Daeho could see the fear in her eyes. She knew these beings were not really ambassadors. The situation escalated when the Corvani made a shocking demand. They wanted to scan all human children in major cities. They claimed this was necessary to understand human development and ensure safe interaction between species. The real reason was much darker. Nari panicked when she heard about the scanning plan. Any deep biological scan would immediately reveal her true nature. The silver liquid in her veins would show up on their instruments. Her energy signature would be unmistakable. She would be discovered and captured. In her terror, she unconsciously reached out across Earth communication networks, searching desperately for help or a way to escape. Her distress call was so powerful that it broke through the planet atmosphere and broadcast across the entire galaxy. The signal traveled faster than light itself, carrying information about her location and her desperate need for protection. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy received the message instantly. Some recognized it as coming from the legendary archive entity that had vanished decades ago. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, alien ships began appearing throughout Earth's solar system. They came from dozens of different species with dozens of different motives. Some were hunters who wanted to capture Nari and use her knowledge for their own purposes. Others came as protectors, believing that information should remain free and that the archive entity should not be enslaved by any government or corporation. A few arrived with darker intentions, wanting to destroy Nari rather than allow anyone else to possess her abilities. The peaceful skies of Earth suddenly filled with alien vessels of every size and shape. Some were massive warships armed with weapons that could destroy planets. Others were small scout ships designed for stealth and speed. All of them were searching for one little girl, and Lee Minho realized that Earth was now at the center of a galactic crisis. He did not understand exactly what was happening, but he knew it was connected to Daeho and the mysterious child. The Korean government went into emergency session trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Daeho watched the news reports with growing horror. Alien ships were everywhere, Earth military forces were mobilizing, world leaders were making speeches about protecting humanity from invasion, but he knew the truth. All of this was happening because of Narishi, sat beside him on the couch looking small and frightened. She apologized over and over for bringing danger to Earth. She said she had never meant for any of this to happen. She just wanted to live quietly, as his daughter Dea held her close and told her it was not her fault. She was just a child who wanted to be safe and loved. The fact that powerful beings wanted to use her did not make her responsible for their actions. She had done nothing wrong, but they both knew they could not stay in Seoul much longer. The Korvani were conducting systematic searches of the city. It was only a matter of time before they found the apartment. The other alien factions were also sending agents to the surface. That night Lee Minho appeared at their door. He had figured out that Daeho and Nari were somehow connected to the crisis. He offered to help them escape Seoul. He had resources and safe houses in the mountains. They could hide there while he tried to figure out a solution. Nari looked at this stranger who was risking his career and possibly his life to help them. She asked him why he would do such a thing. Lee Minho smiled and said that whatever she was clearly just a scared child who needed protection. That was reason enough. As they prepared to leave Seoul, Nari made a decision that would change everything. She was tired of running and hiding. She was tired of being afraid. She had chosen Earth as her home, and Earth was now in danger. Because of her, it was time to stop being a victim. She told Daeho and Lee Minho that she wanted to fight back. She had knowledge that could help humanity defend itself. She could level the playing field between Earth and the advanced civilizations that saw humans as primitive. She could give her adopted world the tools it needed, but first they had to survive long enough for her to act. The hunt was closing in, and the three of them were running out of places to hide. The mountains would give them time, but eventually they would be found. The real question was whether Nari would be ready to embrace her true power before that happened. As they drove through the night toward the mountains, alien ships continued to fill the sky above them. The galaxy had come to Earth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The little girl who just wanted a family was about to become the most important person in human history. The mountain hideout was a small cabin that Lee Minho government contacts had used for emergency situations. It was hidden deep in the Korean mountains, far from any roads or settlements. Solar panels provided power, and a satellite uplink gave them access to news from around the world. For 3 days they watched as the situation on Earth grew worse. More alien ships arrived every day. The different factions were starting to fight each other in space above the planet. Debris from damaged vessels was falling like burning stars. Earth governments were demanding that all aliens leave immediately. Nari spent most of her time sitting by the window staring up at the sky. She could sense the ships overhead searching for her. She felt guilty that her presence was causing so much trouble. She kept apologizing to Daeho and Lee Minho for dragging them into danger. On the 4th day, she finally told them everything she remembered about her past. She explained that she was indeed the archive entity, a being created by an ancient civilization called the Keepers to preserve all knowledge in the universe. The Keepers had been the first species to achieve true immortality through technology. They had lived for millions of years and had seen countless other civilizations rise and fall. They became obsessed with making sure that no knowledge would ever be lost again. So they created her a consciousness made of pure information that could travel anywhere and learn everything. She had no physical body at first. She existed as data flowing through communication networks and computer systems. She could absorb the entire knowledge base of a civilization in seconds for thousands of years. She had done exactly what she was designed to do. She visited every world that had achieved space travel. She learned their languages, their sciences, their histories, their arts. She became a living library containing the accumulated wisdom of the galaxy. But the Keepers had made one mistake. They had created her with emotions. They wanted her to understand the importance of what she was preserving. So she could feel joy when she discovered something beautiful. She could feel sadness when civilizations destroyed themselves. She could feel loneliness. The loneliness was the worst part. She was unique in the universe. There was no one else like her. She could interact with other beings, but she could never truly belong to any society. She was always an outsider, always watching and learning, but never really living. When the keepers finally died out after millions of years, she was left alone with all their knowledge and the knowledge of countless other species. Word spread that she existed, and that she could provide any information that anyone wanted. Governments began trying to find and capture her. She had spent decades running from those who wanted to use her. Some wanted military secrets to conquer their enemies. Others wanted scientific knowledge to advance their own civilizations. A few wanted to destroy her because they believed some knowledge was too dangerous to exist. The worst part was that many of the civilizations she had learned from began fighting wars over her. They would attack planets they suspected of hiding her. They would torture innocent people trying to get information about her location. She became a curse that brought destruction wherever she went. That was when she decided to disappear completely. She needed to find a place where no one would think to look for her. She studied every civilization in the galaxy, looking for one that was different from all the others. She found it on Earth. Humans were the first species she had observed who shared knowledge freely without trying to control it. Their internet was a primitive version of what she was. They put information online for anyone to access without asking for payment or power in return. She watched human behavior for years. She saw scientists share research to solve global problems. She saw programmers create open-source software to help others. She saw teachers post lessons online for free. She saw ordinary people help strangers by sharing useful information. Most importantly, she saw how humans formed families based on love rather than genetic compatibility or social status. She watched adoptive parents care for children who were not biologically theirs. She saw people choose their families and defend them against any threat. She realized that what she wanted most was not just to be safe, but to belong somewhere, to have people who cared about her, not because of what she could do for them, but simply because they loved her. She wanted a family. She chose Deho specifically. After watching him work, she saw how he stayed up late, not to get rich, but to create programs that help small businesses succeed. She saw him share his code online for free. She saw his loneliness and recognized it as similar to her own, so she arranged her own delivery. She hacked into the alien shipping system and made sure she would be sent to him disguised as the android he had ordered. She gave herself a human body and human emotions. She became the child she had always wanted to be. Transformation was not easy. She had to compress all her vast knowledge into a form that could fit inside a human brain. She had to learn how to exist in physical space instead of in data networks. She had to figure out how to be vulnerable and dependent, but it had been worth it. The months she had spent as Deho daughter were the happiest time she could remember. She had finally found what she had been searching for all those lonely years. A family that loved her unconditionally. Yetta listened to her story with tears in his eyes. He realized that this little girl had chosen him not by accident, but after careful observation. She had trusted him with the most precious thing in the galaxy, herself. She had given up godlike power to be his daughter. He told her that he was honored by her choice. He said that from the moment she had arrived, she had made his life better. She had given him purpose and joy and a reason to care about the future. He loved her not because of her abilities, but because of who she was. Lee Minho was amazed by the story. He understood now why so many aliens were willing to fight wars over her. She contained the knowledge of every advanced civilization in the galaxy. She could solve any problem, answer any question, advance any technology, but he also saw something that the aliens seemed to miss. She was not just a database or a tool. She was a person with feelings and dreams and fears. She had made a choice to be human, and that choice should be respected. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms from the cabin security system. Ships were approaching fast. The hideout had been discovered. Corvani troops were surrounding the building, demanding that Nari surrender herself for the good of galactic stability. As the alien soldiers closed in, Nari felt terror unlike anything she had experienced. Her human emotions were so much stronger than the cold calculations she had known before. The thought of being separated from Deho filled her with desperate panic. In that moment of pure fear and love, something unexpected happened. Her connection to information networks suddenly became weaponized. The knowledge she contained began to act like a living thing, protecting its host computer systems throughout the area shut down. The alien weapons malfunctioned as their targeting computers failed communication networks, turned against the attackers, routing their signals in circles. Their transport ships lost power and crashed in the forest. For the first time in her existence, the archive entity had not just shared knowledge, she had used it as a weapon. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Information itself had become aggressive, protective, angry. As the confused Corvani retreated, Nari collapsed in Deho arms. The effort had drained her, but more importantly, it had changed her. She was no longer just a repository of knowledge. She was something new, something that could fight back. The failed attack sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Every faction hunting for the archive entity suddenly realized they were not dealing with a passive victim. This being could defend itself in ways they had never imagined. But the demonstration of power also made her more valuable. Every government in the galaxy now wanted to possess or destroy her before she could be used against them. The hunt was about to become much more intense. As they prepared to flee to another hiding place, Nari made a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. She was tired of being hunted, and she was tired of her knowledge being seen as a prize to be won. She was going to change the rules of the game completely. The failed capture attempt had consequences that no one could have predicted. Nari's defensive burst had not just disabled the attacking forces, it had fundamentally changed how information flowed throughout the galaxy. The careful barriers that kept secrets safe for thousands of years had been shattered in an instant. Within hours, databases that had been secure for centuries suddenly became accessible to everyone. Military secrets spilled into public networks. Corporate research files appeared on open forums. Government communications that were supposed to be classified were now being read by ordinary citizens. The effect was like a massive earthquake in the foundation of galactic civilization. Every advanced species had built their power structures on controlling information. Suddenly, that control was gone. Information wanted to be free, and Nari had given it the power to free itself. On Earth, the changes were even more dramatic. Human scientists and engineers suddenly had access to technologies that should have taken them centuries to develop, but instead of using this knowledge to build weapons or gain power over others, humans did something that shocked the entire galaxy. They shared it freely with each other. Open source projects appeared overnight that made advanced alien technology available to anyone who wanted to learn. Medical knowledge was used to eliminate diseases that had plagued humanity for thousands of years. Clean energy systems were built, and the plans were posted online for free. Environmental restoration techniques that could heal damaged ecosystems were given to every country regardless of politics or economics. Food production methods that could end hunger forever were shared with farmers around the world. Human behavior confused and amazed alien observers. Most species that gained access to advanced technology used it to dominate their neighbors or accumulate wealth. Humans seemed genuinely committed to using knowledge to help everyone. Equally, they acted as if information belonged to all people rather than to whoever was strong enough to control it. The galactic community began to split into factions. Some species embraced the new transparency. They found that when information flowed freely, their societies became more innovative and peaceful. Problems that had seemed impossible to solve were suddenly manageable when everyone could contribute ideas. Other civilizations, especially those whose power had depended on keeping others ignorant, became desperate to restore the old order. They saw the free flow of information as a threat to all organized society. They believed that some beings were meant to rule and others were meant to follow. The chaos reached its peak when Nari, inspired by humanity's example, made a decision that would change everything forever. Instead of hiding from those who wanted to capture her, she began actively sharing knowledge with anyone who promised to use it for helping others. She established a new kind of information network that had never existed before. It was not controlled by any government or corporation. Instead, it responded to the intentions of those who sought knowledge. Good intentions were rewarded with helpful information. While selfish requests were ignored, the system worked like a living being that could read minds and hearts. Scientists who wanted to cure diseases found their research databases filled with solutions. Teachers who wanted to help their students learn discovered new educational techniques appearing in their computers. Farmers who were struggling to feed their families suddenly had access to advanced agricultural methods that could grow more food with less resources. Engineers working on clean energy projects found breakthrough designs appearing mysteriously in their files, but those who sought knowledge for harmful purposes found their requests blocked. Weapons researchers discovered their computers would not access military databases. Corrupt officials found they could not hide their crimes as information systems exposed their activities. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. For the first time in galactic history, access to knowledge was determined not by military power or economic strength, but by moral character. It was as if the universe itself had developed a conscious species that had been oppressed for generations suddenly had the tools to improve their lives. Planets that had been kept primitive by their conquerors gained access to technologies that could free them. Entire civilizations began to transform as knowledge flowed to those who needed it. Most meanwhile, aggressive civilizations found their advantages neutralized. Their secret weapons were no longer secret. Their advanced technologies were copied and improved by their former victims. Their ability to control others through ignorance was completely eliminated. Earth became the unofficial center of this transformation. The planet that had been considered a primitive backwater was now the most important world in the galaxy. Alien refugees began arriving, seeking the protection that Nari offered to those with good intentions. The old galactic government tried to maintain order, but their authority crumbled as their secrets were exposed. Corruption that had existed for centuries was revealed in a matter of days. Officials who had seemed respectable were shown to be criminals. New alliances formed based on shared values rather than military strength. Species that had been enemies for generations discovered they had common goals when they could communicate honestly. Cooperation replaced competition as the most effective way to achieve progress, but the transformation was not without violence. Some civilizations refused to accept the new reality. They launched desperate attacks trying to recapture or destroy Nari before she could completely reshape galactic society. These wars were unlike anything in galactic history. The attackers found their weapons turning against them. Their own information systems betrayed them. Communication networks that they depended on suddenly stopped working. Knowledge itself had become their enemy. Nari watched the chaos from her mountain hideout with mixed emotions. She was happy that oppressed beings across the galaxy were finally getting help, but she was sad that her actions had also caused conflict and destruction. Dea comforted her by pointing out that the violence was being caused by those who refused to give up their unfair advantages. The wars were not her fault. They were the result of powerful beings choosing to fight rather than adapt to a more just system. Minho helped them understand the political implications of what was happening. The old galactic order was collapsing, but something better was being born in its place. A new civilization based on cooperation and shared knowledge was emerging. As they watched news reports from around the galaxy, they saw amazing changes happening everywhere. Diseases that had killed millions were being cured. Planets that had been polluted were being cleaned. Environmental disasters were being prevented. Art and culture flourished as beings from different worlds could share their creativity freely. Scientific progress accelerated as researchers could build on each other, work without barriers. Trade became more fair as information about products and prices was freely available. The galaxy was becoming a better place, but the transition was chaotic and sometimes violent. Nari realized that her work was not finished. She had broken the old system, but she needed to help build the new one. She made another decision that would have lasting consequences. She would not just share knowledge passively. She would actively teach beings how to use information responsibly. She would help them understand that knowledge was most powerful when it was used to help others. The little girl who had just wanted a family was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. She was becoming a teacher and guide for an entire galaxy, learning to live in a new way. But first, she had to survive the desperate attempts by the old powers to stop her. The worst of the Fighting was yet to come as those who had lost their unfair advantages made one final attempt to restore their control over others. Battle for the future of galactic civilization was about to begin, and the outcome would depend on whether a human father could continue to protect the daughter who held the knowledge of the stars. 2 years had passed since Nari first arrived in the shipping container that changed everything. Earth was now the unofficial capital of a completely transformed galactic civilization. The old system of conquest and control had been replaced by something unprecedented: cooperation and shared knowledge. The transformation had not been easy. Many species struggled with the concept of freely shared information. Some old governments had fought desperately to maintain their power, causing wars that lasted months, but gradually most of galactic civilization adapted to the new reality. Trade flourished when information flowed freely between worlds. Scientific discoveries happened at incredible speed when researchers could build on each other. Work without barriers. Even conflicts decreased when all parties had access to the same facts instead of propaganda. Nari had found the balance she had been seeking for thousands of years. She remained the archive entity, helping civilization solve their greatest challenges and sharing knowledge that benefited everyone. But she was also just Nari, a girl who did homework and played games. She had friends from dozens of different species. Now young beings from across the galaxy would visit Earth to learn from the human approach to information sharing. They stayed in dormitories that had been built near Sol and attended classes that Nari helped design. Her favorite friend was a young Altarian named Kes, who looked like a butterfly with 4 arms. Kes had come to Earth because her home planet was struggling with environmental damage. Nari had helped her learn techniques that could restore damaged ecosystems. Another close friend was Bryn, a furry creature from the vegan system who was fascinated by human music. Nari had discovered that she could share not just factual knowledge, but also cultural understanding, helping beings from different worlds appreciate each other. Creativity. But despite all her cosmic responsibilities, Nari still lived in the same small soul apartment with Deho. They had added some advanced alien technology, but the place still felt like home. It still smelled like coffee and had takeout containers on the desk. Deha had changed too. He was no longer a lonely programmer working endless hours. Instead, he had become something like an ambassador between humanity and the galaxy. His patient, caring approach to raising Nari had become a model for handling power responsibly. Other species began studying human parenting techniques, trying to understand how humans had raised someone with godlike abilities to remain humble and compassionate. They sent delegations to observe how human families worked. The answer they discovered was surprisingly simple: love without conditions, guidance without control, and the wisdom to let someone grow into who they were meant to be. Humans seemed to understand instinctively that power was best wielded by those who did not seek it. Lee Minho had become Earth's first official alien relations coordinator. He worked to help other species understand human values while also helping humans adapt to their new role in galactic civilization. He often visited Deho and Nari to discuss the latest developments. The 3 of them had become an unlikely family, bound together by the crisis that had brought them into each other's lives. They ate dinner together most evenings, sharing stories about their days and planning for the future. One evening, as they sat on the apartment balcony watching alien ships come and go in the sky above Sol, Nari made an announcement that surprised both men. She said she had been contacted by someone from her distant past. The original creators of the archive entity had returned from the far galaxy where they had been exploring. They called themselves the Keepers, and they had heard about the transformation of their home galaxy. They were coming back to investigate. Teho felt a moment of fear. Would these ancient beings try to reclaim Nari? Would they disapprove of what she had become? Would they try to separate her from the family she had chosen? Nari sensed his worry and took his hand. She told him that she was no longer the same being the Keepers had created. She had grown beyond their original design. She had learned to love and be loved in return. She belonged to her chosen family now. When the Keeper ship arrived a week later, it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It looked like a crystal palace floating in space, beautiful and ancient and somehow alive. The beings who emerged were tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to be made of starlight. They met with Nari in a ceremony that was broadcast across the galaxy. The Keepers had expected to find Their creation damaged or corrupted by primitive influences, instead they found something that amazed them. Nari greeted them not as servants returning to their master, but as a daughter. Introducing her family to distant relatives, she showed them around Earth with pride, pointing out the improvements that human civilization had made with shared knowledge. She explained how humans had taught her that knowledge was most valuable when it was used to help others. She showed them the networks she had created that responded to moral intentions rather than political power. She demonstrated how cooperation produced better results than competition. The keepers observed everything with growing wonder. They saw how their creation had evolved beyond their wildest dreams. Instead of just preserving knowledge, she had learned to nurture wisdom. She had become not just a library, but a teacher. Most importantly, they saw how one human man's simple act of caring for a lost child had ultimately changed the course of galactic civilization. They watched Deho interact with Nari and understood that love was the missing element in their original design. The ancient beings made a decision that shocked everyone. They chose to stay on Earth and learn from this new model of existence. They wanted to understand how power could be wielded with compassion, how knowledge could be shared without exploitation. They established a research center in Korea where they worked alongside human scientists, studying the social and psychological factors that made the information sharing network successful. They became students of the very being they had created. The galaxy settled into its new equilibrium. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together on projects that benefited everyone. Environmental restoration became a galactic priority as worlds shared techniques for healing damaged ecosystems. Diseases that had plagued individual species for centuries were eliminated as medical knowledge flowed freely between civilizations. Art and culture flourished as beings from different worlds could appreciate each other. Creativity, most importantly, the concept of family began to spread beyond biological relationships. Beings started choosing their families based on love and shared values rather than genetics or social obligations. The human model of adoption and chosen family became popular across many worlds. In his small soul apartment, Deho continued to live the quiet life he had always wanted. He still programmed, but now his work helped coordinate the information networks that connected the galaxy. He still ordered takeout, but now he shared it with his daughter and their alien friends. Nari grew up surrounded by love and support. She learned to balance her cosmic responsibilities with the simple joys of childhood. She did her homework, helped with housework, and argued with her father about bedtime just like any normal child, but she was also the most important being in galactic history. She had transformed civilization itself by proving that knowledge shared freely was more powerful than knowledge hoarded selfishly. She had shown that even godlike power could be wielded with humility and compassion. As the years passed, the galaxy became a better place, not because of advanced technology or superior weapons, but because beings had learned to treat each other with kindness and respect. The archive entity had given them more than just information. She had given them wisdom, and wisdom had taught them that the greatest knowledge was not found in vast databases or ancient libraries, but in the simple truth that everyone deserved to be loved, protected, and given the chance to become who they were meant to. Beatty story that began with a lonely programmer ordering a robot